can't stop looking at my eyes. I like tight-lined my eyes and like I'm entranced. No wonder blue-eyed people do this. Oh my gosh. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jamie and today we are going to go over all of the books that I read in the month of April, and it's been such pleasant weather. I thought maybe I could do it outside. I don't think I've ever filmed like a sit down video outside. I've done a couple of vlogs, but I'm also trying to be very wary of the fact that like I have neighbors who could potentially hear me. So I'm going to try to be quiet. I did such a good job reading the books on my TBR shelf. I didn't finish a lot of them. I think it was like 2 or 3. Is coming forward. No, I didn't finish everyone that I picked up, but that wasn't the point. The point was to either enjoy them or get rid of them, and I've already unhauled the ones I didn't finish, so we will talk about that. I feel like a bee is gonna fly at me. Oh my god. The first book I read for the month of April was an audiobook. It was The Haunting of Payne Hollow by Kelly Armstrong, and I picked this up because it had a horse on the cover. And that was really the only reason why. Truly, it's because it had a horse on the cover. And you know me, I'm a horse girl. I love anything that has a horse on a cover. It's why I picked up What Feasts at Night, which introduced me to T. Kingfisher. So sometimes it works out for me. Sometimes it's great. Sometimes it's not. This one may not have been. So this is a reimagining or a retelling or an adaptation. I guess those are all synonyms for The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which I don't think I've ever actually read. I know it through cultural osmosis, but I don't know it specifically. I've never read like, is it the Legend of Sleepy Hollow or like the Tales of Ichabod Crane, or are they the same thing? I don't know. Our main character, when she was younger, witnessed her father burying the body of a child, and obviously she was like, oh my god, my father has just killed a child. So she goes to the proper authorities, and the father gets arrested and ends up taking his own life due to the guilt of what he has done. And since then, Samantha and her mother have been estranged from the family. It's a very rich, very old family that's been on this estate for many, many years. The grandfather basically disowned them due to the fact that she came forward about what she witnessed. When the grandfather passes, in his will, he leaves the entire estate to Samantha. And this is like a $10 million estate on the condition that she stays at the estate for a month in order to learn the truth. And in it, basically, the will says you can't receive the inheritance until you like realize that you were wrong and admit it. I thought it was weird because like even if you stay there and you didn't learn all this stuff, is my thing coming forward? I thought it was a bit weird because like even if she stayed at the estate and didn't learn the truth, she would still have to admit that she was wrong, I think is how the will was written out. Anyway, that's not the point. So we learn the truth and we learn about these shenanigans, this maybe possibly supernatural thing that's going on. I thought it was going to be a horror because it's the haunting of Payne Hollow, but to me it wasn't very horror, at least the things I enjoy in a horror book were not there. It was more of a mystery suspense, I guess, with a supernatural flair. My biggest problem with this book is that it stops everything to reiterate the stakes several times, almost every single time, especially when we're doing the exposition. I could understand once where they explain to the reader, because that's what it's for the reader's benefit, but they explain that they've thought of every loophole, and the lawyer and the will, the grandfather, they've thought of everything, and so there's no way out except for like if she gets hurt, but other than that there's no way out of this thing. If she wants the inheritance, she needs the $10 million to take care of her mother. If she wants that, she has to do this, and they go over that multiple times. They go over every other path, every other option she could take, and either denies it. So like her aunt says, I'll give you part of my inheritance, and she goes, no, you need that money. She was given the opportunity to leave and didn't because she wanted to stick it to her grandfather, I guess. Anyway, other than reiterating the stakes, stopping and doing that seemingly once a chapter, once we started getting some like clues about the mystery, about the supernatural elements potentially, it seemed like every time we got a new clue, a new piece of information, we had to stop. All the characters get in a circle and then just talk it over and go through every logical option it could potentially be, and then prove that it's not that logical option because it doesn't fit this, or this other thing isn't explained, and yada yada. I get the point of that. I do. I understand that the author is trying to cover their plot holes, basically, to make sure there aren't any plot holes to explain. But was it really necessary? It got so boring. Every time there was a new clue, I knew we were just going to have another like 3 paragraphs trying to explain logically what it could be, but it couldn't possibly be that because it's supernatural. Just accept the supernatural. Just accept the supernatural for once in your life. Anyway, that's where I got to. I had it on like, I don't know, 2.5 speed because I was like, come on, we don't have to keep going in circles about this. Just accept it and move on. The first few times when everyone's like in denial about the supernatural existing, whatever. But like after that, it makes it feel as if the author couldn't trust that the reader was exploring with the characters, so she had to like walk us through it. That's what it felt like to me. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, I want to explore the story with them. I don't want to be led through this and have everything stop and come to a halt while we go over all the other options that can't possibly be. Okay, you get what I mean. This isn't something that was like bad on the book's behalf, but it did kind of change my experience. I will say that we talk about water horses, which is a common myth. In Scotland, they're considered kelpies. In Ireland, I think they're Capel Uchka. The Scorpio races were about those. So they are well known mythological beings that go by many names. And in this story, we were going with the Dutch version of this myth. And the Dutch version is pronounced Neckar, Nekkar, Neckar. But because I had it on such a fast speed, the audiobook, anytime they said that word, it did not sound like neck car. It sounded like a different word that begins with N, and it was just a jump scare. That's not the book's fault. It's a Dutch word. It's a real thing. Really color my experience, because every time we would be talking about these weird horse myth things and like how they interact with the family, and then all of a sudden they'd use the word and I'd be like, oh wait. The Listeners by Maggie Staffiter. I knew I was going to love this book. I knew I was going to love it. I just didn't know how much I was going to love it. I loved it. I loved it. It's a 5-star read. It's Maggie Staffiter. And I love how she kept her own voice, but aged it up a bit. I mean, her YA novels aren't necessarily young. All of her characters are on the older end of the spectrum, and the books are enjoyed by adults. It's not exactly a young book. There are some YA where you can tell it's for a younger reader, and I was 24 when I read the Raven Cycle, 25 when I read the Scorpio Races. As a person who gets very annoyed by immature writing, it's not immature, but she still found a way to age it up so that you could tell this was an adult novel. Not that a teen couldn't enjoy it, but you could tell that this was for an adult audience. And I loved how she balanced that. It was very interesting, especially from a writing aspect of like just analyzing how she did that was interesting. I couldn't even put my finger on it. I couldn't explain why, but she did it and it was great. So The Listeners is about this hotel in West Virginia, and this hotel has something going on with it. It's got something called sweet water, which is mineral water, but it's kind of magical. It's got magical healing properties. They've made it into like a spa and sauna situation. The whole area runs on the Sweetwater, but only a few people are able to like interact with the water, kind of calm it. And when the water starts acting up, weird things start happening. There's got to be some sort of balance going on. You know, the hotel gets really out of balance when it gets commandeered by the American government to hold the diplomats of the Axis powers. So this was a real thing that happened. Hotels did, and specifically fancy resort hotels, got commandeered in order to host the various diplomats of the Axis powers. So Germany, Italy, Japan. Obviously, these people have diplomatic immunity. They might not necessarily be part of the Axis powers because they've been in allied countries for years. They might not align themselves with that. So you can't really call them a criminal at this point. And even if you had proof that they have diplomatic immunity. So like there's no use to this. Anyway, so they're trying to hold them in a contained area so that they can eventually swap the Axis power diplomats with the American ones that are being held overseas and get everyone back to where they need to be, right? That's a bit difficult, and it throws the whole balance of the hotel off and the water. And June, our main character, who's the general manager, has to deal with that. Something that I appreciated about this novel is that it brought to light the eugenics of Nazi Germany, because we talk a lot about the Holocaust, and we should. That should be like the biggest thing we talk about. But Nazi Germany didn't stop with the Jewish people, the Romani people, the homosexual people. They went after people who had learning disabilities, who were physically disabled, who had mental illnesses, and there was a lot of eugenics, which was appreciated by the American government as well. So, like, pot calling the kettle black, you know, over here, bringing attention to this, specifically when it comes to autism, I assume, or neurodivergence, I guess, to be more general, but kind of reading as autism, getting a lens into what that was about, and what it was like for somebody who was neurodivergent at the time. I was a bit worried that Hannelore, our neurodivergent character, was going to fall into more of a Rain Man archetype where neurodivergence is accepted and validated only if the person is able to have this insane talent, this insane intellect, this insane cool thing that nobody else can do. And I was worried that we were going to get that, because when Hannelore is introduced, she doesn't speak, but she can memorize and sing songs with total oh my god, with total precision. She can memorize and sing songs with total precision. I'm not going to try it again. I was worried again that we were going to get into this idea that Hannelore is special. She should be saved because even though she's neurodivergent, even though she can't talk, even though she's kind of a bit weird, she's really smart. And because she's smart, she's valid. But we didn't. And I think Maggie Staffiter does make a good point of showcasing that these characters are not trying to spare Hannelore's life because she's smart or because she has this talent. These characters are trying to save her from suffering and also being forcibly sterilized, possibly even killed due to her neurodivergence. They're trying to save her life because she's valid, because she deserves to live, because no matter what is going on in her head or her personality or what is happening, she deserves to live. And making a point of saying that her life is just as worthy as anyone else's, not because of any talent she has, but just because she's alive, is perfect. And I loved that messaging. And I wanted more of that in all of our other books about neurodivergence. I feel like there's too many Rain Man archetypes. Anyway, I'm going on a tangent. Also, teared up a little bit about June realizing that her tantrums were the same as Hannelore's tantrums when she was a kid, and having to forcibly learn to work around that whole thing, a whole like late diagnosis thing, made me really tear up. Maybe I should get a diagnosis. Maybe I should look for assessment. I don't know. Maybe I should. If I'm tearing up so much at any book about neurodivergence, maybe that's a sign. I don't know. Anyway, there is kind of a romantic love interest with Tucker. I wasn't falling for him, but I think that's just because I imagined him as an old man, and he's not. He's like 35, but in my head I was like, that's an old gross man. So anyone above like 27 is an old gross man. So yeah, that was my issue with Tucker, is that I just kind of saw him as like this old country bumpkin. And he's not. He's a really nice guy, but I couldn't stop imagining him like that. Anyway, moving on. Okay, next I listened to Pony Confidential by Christina Lynch, and this one's difficult to talk about. So this is the story of a pony who goes on a cross-country journey to find his former owner, and then learns that she's been accused of a crime that happened when she was 12. She's an old woman now. Not old. Sorry. She's a grown woman now. She's the mom of like a preteen, and she's been accused of something that happened when she was 12. And so this pony now has to go and prove her innocence, or at least solve the crime. And you'd think that this would be a happy, silly little like sheep detective that's coming out soon. You know, this like, oh, this pony detective, he's gonna prove his owner was innocent. The whole book, I was like trying not to cry. The whole book is about this pony explaining that all ponies have horrible lives because they just get abandoned by their owners and then bought and sold like they're nothing, and then they become circus ponies or party ponies or lesson ponies, and they just get abused and neglected, and it was so sad. And every pony is upset and feels abandoned by their very first owners because their owners grow up and get too big to ride them. What do you mean? What do you mean every pony I've ever loved is upset that I no longer ride them? And this came to me at a time where I am desperately trying to stop myself from impulse buying a pony. The entire last 2 weeks, I've been trying to not buy a pony. I don't have the money for one, by the way. This is like an impulse, horrible financial decision. But like, I'm trying to talk myself out of it. But like, also, I would love my own pony. Anyway, not the point. Anyway, the whole book I was trying not to cry because like this is a goddamn modern day Black Beauty. Like, if I had to critique this book, it was a bit confusing, at least while listening to it, trying to keep track of the timeline. It took me forever to realize that the pony's timeline is linear from the time that Penny, the female character, owns him to the time where he reunites with her. And Penny's timeline is in the present, but then flashing back. And I wasn't getting that. It took me forever to realize that. So then for a really long time, I thought Pony was also talking about flashbacks, not, one linear timeline. So it was weird, but I loved it. I even loved the daughter character's storyline. Our main character, Penny, has a daughter who has a lot of anxiety or some other mental illness, and there's this like side plot where Penny feels guilty about having to put her daughter in some sort of like boarding school, like mental illness boarding school thing. And usually I would have said a side plot like that was too much on top of everything else that's going on, because there is so much going on. But I feel like it meshed well with the narrative. Normally I'd be like, there's too much for anything to shine, but I think this ended up mixing with the themes, I guess, of the narrative, that it actually made sense, and so it meshed well. Freshwater by Akwaeke Emezi. And I don't know about this book. I don't know. I finished it a couple days ago, and I have a lot of thoughts, but also nothing to say. And I think ultimately I ended up just not enjoying the book, and that's the end all be all. I can tell that the author has a lot of talent. Like, the prose was really good. I could tell that there was a lot of work, a lot of raw emotion put into this book, but there's just a lot of story choices that I was not a fan of. And it makes me wonder what the author was trying to achieve with this story. This follows the life of a child named Ada, who eventually it's revealed that she has some form of DID or other multiple personality delusion, something or other. But it's shown through this lens of these different personalities being spirits almost possessing or like working with her. I think it's an interesting way to explore mental illness, that maybe a spirit is possessing you or interacting with you, and that's how your mental illness manifests to you, or how one explains what they're seeing, what they're hearing. So we have the part where Ada is a child, and we get a few different incidents, encounters, some important life events that happen when they are a child. And then we get the section where the Ada goes to college in America, and we get a big bad thing that happens, very traumatic scene. And that's when a new spirit, new personality comes to protect her from what has happened, which is very often what happens with DID. And then after that, it's a lot of sex. It's a lot of it is a litany of her sexual encounters. And it's not sex in like a smutty, fun, like, oh yeah, you go girl kind of way. It's sex in a violent way, in a destructive way, in a self-harm kind of way. Sex to be bad to yourself. So it's not that things were repeated like the phrases, but it is just many scenes of our narrator, Askura, talking about how she tried to destroy a relationship, or how she's trying to hurt herself and Ada, and do that by having very painful sex, and letting these people harm her during sex, and things like that. And if we got less of that, I think I might have enjoyed the book more. But because it's a big portion of the book is just the various sexual encounters, I got the idea after the first like three. Also, it's a non-linear timeline, and so a lot of the relationships are on again, off again, and she would describe the timeline by the boys she was with. You know, I was fucking around with this one guy, and he's the guy that I met 2 summers ago, but that was before I started letting them enter me, and all like that kind of verbiage, but also trying to describe the guys through how she views them in a sexual lens, I guess. I don't know, but like it's weird. The guys aren't really characters, they're just there. It's very confusing because you know, also, I hate to say it, she starts college when she's like 16, and some of these guys are said to be like 27. So I have no idea how old she is, how legal this shit is, what she's doing. None of it's good. It's all bad. All of these are horrible relationships. It's just very, very difficult to get through. And when it's not graphic sex scenes, it's graphic depictions of self harm, where she talks about like actually doing it on page. I can tell that there's raw emotion. Obviously, this is something the author has gone through. In fact, the character is very similar to just what I can tell from Googling the author. The main character is Nigerian and Indian. So is the author. The main character has DID, or is implied to have DID. The author has come out and said that they have DID. The main character identifies as non-binary. So does the author. The main character is queer in some capacity, and I believe so is the author. Like there's a lot of the author's own personal life in this character, even if anything that happened to the character didn't actually happen to the author. That's why I want to be nice about it, because it's like, obviously you put a lot of yourself into this character and into this book, and I don't want to say that your trauma wasn't worth talking about, your trauma wasn't worth, writing a book about. And this is where I'm going to be a bit mean. It kind of feels self-indulgent for the author. It feels as if the author couldn't keep this in, or for whatever reason didn't want to keep this stuff in, and so started writing a book about it. Does it need to be published? Does it need to be enjoyed by other people? Does it need to be experienced by other people? And that's a big question. That's a question for any art. That's a question for any book. Like, what is the point of the book? Is it to educate? It's a depiction of DID written by someone who has DID, which I think might be the only one in existence. DID is very misunderstood, very much stigmatized due to movies like Split. I've been told that if you are a person who self harms or has suicidal ideation or maybe even attempted, you shouldn't be reading or watching media that has graphic depictions of self harm or suicide attempts because it can be encouraging. That's why 13 Reasons Why was so controversial, because it had a graphic depiction of her attempt, her death. If you're doing this to appeal to people who are self-harming, who have suicidal ideation, who are dealing with these monsters as well, it being so graphic makes me hesitate to recommend it to people like that, because like, yes, you can see yourself in that, but like, that's not necessarily what psychiatrists would recommend. I don't know. So that's why I'm sitting here. I'm like, is it just because I didn't like it? Is it just because I didn't enjoy the story as an entertaining story? And because I don't deal with these things, I couldn't relate to it. And because I couldn't relate to it, I'm like, nobody should read it. Is that where I'm coming at it with it? I don't know. There's a lot to think about. And I guess that's the point of the art, is to think about it, but I don't want to think about it. You know, maybe I'm turning my brain off. I don't know. I've been on social media way too much, but I'm sitting here going like, is it helpful in any way? Is it artistic in any way? Because like I said, it just feels very self-indulgent of the author. But if it is just the author trying to get their trauma outside of themselves, does it need to be a product that's consumed by other readers? You know, that's always something you have to think about. And I don't know. Next, I read two different T. Kingfisher books, and I haven't written my thoughts down. I just finished What Stalks the Deep. Actually, I'll talk about it now. We're going out of order. So, What Stalks the Deep is the third novella in the Sworn Soldiers trilogy or series. I don't know. Maybe this isn't the last book. Probably not the last book. The Sworn Soldiers series follows Alex Easton, who is a sworn soldier from a made up country called Galatia. So, this exists in the real world, or at least an alternate real world, but there's this tiny little country that nobody really knows called Galatia, and that's where our main character is from. The first book was a retelling of The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe. The second book had a Eastern European folklore something or other as its center monster, and then this book, Alex Easton goes to America and specifically West Virginia. Oh my God, two different West Virginia books. That's wild. Specifically West Virginia, to go into a mine in search of our friend Denton's cousin who has gone missing in this mine. And we find this like weird, gross jelly monster. I just finished it. Don't have my thoughts in order. Like, I finished it a couple hours ago. I enjoyed it because I enjoy T. Kingfisher's writing. I think out of the three, it is my least favorite. I think What Feasts at Night is my favorite. It wasn't exactly horror. We had one scene that put me on edge, but everything else was kind of calm, and I got a little annoyed with Denton. At one point, we get an answer to a question that's been looming over everyone, but I didn't see the work we did to get to that answer. This is the definitive answer. We're not going to keep looking. Okay, I guess. There was some evidence I hadn't figured out. I like Alex as a narrator. I think they bring a little bit of humor to scary things, but because this wasn't that scary, the humor was a little overpowering. Yeah, I get that you're scared of being in a cave and there's this like freaky thing going on, but now's not the time to be cracking jokes, okay? One of my biggest complaints with novellas is that they feel like they're not long enough, which I know is horrible to complain about when it comes to a novella. But I always feel like a novella is almost missing something, that it should have been just a short book, not a long novella. I don't know if that makes sense. But this one feels like the perfect size. It should not have gone on longer. It should not have been any shorter. It was the perfect size. And I felt that with every single Sworn Soldiers book. And honestly, I've read like one or two other novellas by T. Kingfisher, and I feel the exact same way. So she knows how to do a novella. That's for sure. The second T. Kingfisher book is A Sorceress Comes to Call. Not my favorite, not the strongest one. What I love about it is that we have a cast of older characters. So we have like a crotchety old woman. She's an old spinster who's in her like 50s. And I love the little romantic game that she has with the other older man. That's part of this goings on. Oh, I guess I should say The Sorceress Comes to Call is about Cordelia, who is the daughter of a sorceress, and her mother is very abusive, very controlling. She does this thing where she makes Cordelia obedient, and she basically takes over her body and makes her do things. And she's just like horribly abused, like emotionally, mentally, physically. Like she's just scared of her mother. And she comes across this manor and this squire guy and his spinster sister, and spins this whole story about how her carriage was stolen, and like they need help. They're just going to sit here with you guys until they can get back on their feet and sneakily fall in love with the squire, or make the squire fall in love with her. It's a great story. I enjoyed it. It passed the time and it was really interesting, but it's not my favorite. I didn't feel strongly about anyone. Interesting little like thing that the character studies, and this one is geese. So our spinster character, Hester, I want to say her name is, she used to raise geese, and so she's like always talking about them. So that's fun. I love that T. Kingfisher always does that. She always has a character that's like into something. Let's go over my DNFs. These are little honorable mentions. I DNF'd them. A History of Wild Places. You might remember this was a book from my TBR. I DNF'd it around the 120 page mark. This is the story of a guy. I want to say his name was like Owen. I don't think that's true though. That was not his name. Somebody else was named Owen, I think. This guy has this ability where he can touch an object or a thing and see its memories or its experiences. And so because of that, he's really good at finding people, finding missing people. Anyway, so he's finding a woman who was an author, and she went missing and went to this place called Pastoral. And then we follow this guy for like a chapter ish. Dead stop, he finds Pastoral, and then we get completely different characters. And they're supposed to intertwine at some point, I guess, with this guy and the big mystery at hand about like where the author went, the other character went. What got annoying to me is that this was a book about secrets, and every character would not stop talking about how they have a secret, their partner has a secret, they know somebody else is keeping a secret from them, they know that somebody's hiding something or that they're hiding something. They kept repeating it over and over and over again. I don't have time to sit here and be told that you're keeping a secret and that you're hiding it from your wife and then just not tell me the secret. Actually, that's the worst example because that guy, the husband, actually does reveal his secret very early on. But like, just every chapter ended with like, and hopefully he doesn't find out my secret, or I know she's hiding something, I just can't tell what, that kind of shit. And I hate it. I hate it so much. Stop doing that. Edit your manuscript and make sure that shit is minimal. You can have it a little bit, minimize it. Okay, anyway. Ferryman, which was another book for my physical TBR. Again, I DNF'd it around 100-ish pages. Actually, this is really funny. So in my 2026 TBR video at the end of last year, beginning of this year, where I went through my physical TBR and explained what I was going to read, I said that this one was first person present tense, and that was one of the reasons I put it down, because I wasn't in the mood for that. Come to find out, it is third person past tense. I have no idea why I remembered it as first person present tense. I don't know why. That is just wild to me that I had just like created a new memory in my head, because it definitely was not first person present tense. I don't know why I tried to pick it up again. As soon as I started reading it, I was like, oh yeah, this is why I put it down in the first place. It is very immature. Our main characters are like 15 ish. I was just hoping we could get like a little bit more about like death and the philosophy of like grieving yourself, your soul as you die and pass on, and like love and death together. Those are the things I love. Orpheus and Eurydice, Hades and Persephone, love that shit. That was not this book. Our main character Dylan died on a train, and when she wakes up as a spirit in the underworld or the other land or the afterlife, whatever you want to call it, she doesn't remember. She thinks that she's survived the train crash, and she's like, we gotta go find the other people. And this guy who's the ferryman, his name's Tristan, he's like, no, we gotta go this way. And so he starts walking her along what looks to be rural Scotland. This is originally set in Scotland. She's a Scottish girl, so in her mind, the afterlife looks like the hills of Scotland. Specifically, what made me put this down is a similar situation where it's just very repetitive. We just keep going in circles, asking questions that Tristan refuses to answer, even though it probably would be better to answer them. But he's like trying to protect her because he doesn't want her to freak out. He's like, I try and delay telling them as much as possible, blah, 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 blah. The other thing that really pissed me the fuck off is that this is a love story. And Tristan sits there. First of all, he is a millennia old, ageless being. He just manifests as a 16-year-old because that's what's most comfortable to her. So he's been doing this shit for thousands of years. He has met hundreds of thousands of souls. I'm getting loud. Okay, I need to quiet down. And he's sitting here and he's like, I don't know what it is about her. There's something that's just different. I don't know what it is, but like, I just want to protect her a little bit more. I don't know what it is about her, but like, she's the only one that's ever asked me how I am. What the fuck are you talking about? Sir, 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 you are an ageless being who has ferried the souls of hundreds of thousands of people. People who are inherently empathetic. Humanity is empathy. What do you mean? You ferried hundreds of thousands of souls, and she's the first one that's ever asked you how you're doing. That really pissed me off. Listen, okay, actually, no, I do get it. I do get what the author was going for, because this is a YA romance. You know, kids at that age, they want to feel special for no reason. Oh, you know, I'm just existing, inherently kind and empathetic, and you know, I caught the eye of this magical paranormal guy because I'm just so different, but like, I'm not actually different. I'm just a normal girl. But I couldn't stand being told several times that Tristan isn't quite sure what's different about her, but he's just drawn to her for some reason. You're the author. You need to be making that up. You need to be saying that. You need to be explaining what's different about her, because first of all, nothing was different. Okay, she said, how are you feeling? Nothing was said. She asked a couple questions. She was a strong spirit. I was like, I can't keep reading 100 more pages of this idiot telling me he doesn't understand why she's different. You're the author. Make up reasons. You need to have that figured out. And then I read, or I listened to the Starling House, and I think I got about 50% of the way in. I don't think I can keep doing this, guys. And again, very similar reasons. Not necessarily because it was repetitive, but we were 50% of the way in, and we had just now seen the big bad. There wasn't a lot of suspense in the first half. There wasn't a lot of like questioning what was going on in the first half. A lot of laying the groundwork. So I was giving it its time to shine, right? Like 50% of the way in, they're fighting something. It's been revealed that there's paranormal stuff going on with the house. And our two main characters just kiss. They just kiss. And there wasn't a lot of build up into why they were kissing. There wasn't a lot of attraction. There was a bit of a mention that so and so was cute. The other guy saying like he wants to make sure she's safe because he's haunted by these demons in the house. But that was about it. So it really just felt very unnerving, very sterile to all of a sudden just be like mashing their mouths together. And that's kind of how it was described. You know what? I don't have to sit here. If you guys are going to go do that, I don't have to sit here and listen to it. You guys can go be like that somewhere else. And because it was 50% of the way in and there wasn't that much going on with the house and the mystery aspect of it, I was like, I don't care. I don't have to do this. That one TikTok audio that's like, I'm not doing this. I just realized I don't have to do this. That's been my philosophy going into these books when I'm reading them, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm enjoying it. I'm like, you know what? I don't have to. I can put it down. I can give it to someone else. Our main boy character in Starling House, Theodore, I want to say his name was, probably not Theodore. He's the kind of family that they like force you to learn swordsmanship, and they force you to learn like 5 different languages, and you can read all of these things. And so he's going through like his different, I guess, coping mechanisms because he feels anxious and none of them are working. So then he's like, all right, gotta tattoo myself again. And he starts like tattooing himself. My tattoos are my story, but they're also testaments to my pain because, you know, it's a scar that is art. And I don't know if I want to encourage a male main character, a male love interest who's that broody, who's that edgy. You know, I don't like reading about edgy guys. Normally, there's a certain aspect of edgy guys I can get behind, but most of the time they're just a little too little too edgy for me, a little too cringe for me. Those were my DNFs. I enjoyed sitting out here. Okay, I need to tell you guys, I have 3 books left on my physical TBR from my TBR video. Then I have all the gift wrapped ones that are the classics and stuff. That was a different project. I'm going to start that once I've whittled this down. But 3 books. Oh my God. Isn't that wild? It's April. I thought this was going to take all year. Well, I guess it's May. It's May. I guess about halfway through the year. But I've been doing other things, okay? Anyway, not the point. Get out of here. Okay, bye. That's going to be it for me. Thanks so much for watching. If you like that video, like. If you want to watch more, I've got a backlog of wonderful videos you should check out, and you should subscribe for more. Okay, thank you. I hate doing that, especially now that I'm in public. What if somebody heard me? It's wild. Okay, bye. It's so, I've kind of lost my train of thought because, there was a bird. Okay.